back, everybody. For signing day, class of 2019. Everybody should have a press signing packet here with the information on the 20 that Arizona football signed this afternoon. We'll go ahead and open some questions for Coach Sumlin.
So did the recruiting class shape up the way you wanted it to be?
Yeah, this time of year, I don't think there's any coach that says, no, it didn't shape up the way it wanted to. So, we had a definite plan coming into this thing, getting started a little bit later than probably everybody else this year. I thought that, that the two things that stick out were, as I said before, we saved a couple scholarships when we got here with 2 weeks left to go after a class was really signed. And then wanted to get through spring football and look at where the roster is, because all coaches are different with numbers at positions. And then the type of talent that we would have in those numbers at those positions. And then obviously getting into the season, even some of those numbers changed because of injury and things like that. So, I thought that, the priority number one was the offensive, defensive lines, which we were 4 apiece on those, with size, with really 2 junior college players out of those offensive and defensive lines that are, big enough to make an impact. When you're talking about 320, 330-pound guys that can come in and being mid-year guys that you can help develop through spring football, through strength and conditioning. I think that, that was priority number one, without a doubt. We're going to sign a quarterback in every class. You want to do that. I thought we achieved that. Running back, a couple receivers that we had to replace because we had 3 graduate. Although we've got some young ones on the roster, but from a numbers standpoint, we wanted to address that. So I think across the board, whether it was the secondary, our linebackers, I think the corner, I think we hit all spots. We signed a freshman tight end last year, and Bryce has played pretty well, and it's got a couple years left. So. That wasn't necessarily the need that I felt that had to be addressed right now, as much as our offensive and defensive lines.
First time we get to hear from you on quarterback here, Grant Gunnell. First off, talk about his skills. What makes him so special?
Well, he's the all-time leading passer in the state of Texas, in the history of the state of Texas. So. Last time I checked, there's been some pretty good quarterbacks there, and that's a heck of a statistic. So he's a tall guy, can throw it, and has thrown it a lot, and likes to throw it. So smart, and has won a lot of games. And that combination I think that's something that you look for, something I look for in a quarterback. And obviously we've had that relationship. We've had this relationship for the last couple of years.
Does the fact that you broke Foles and Breeze's record in Texas mean something? I
just said that. He broke more than just Foles and Drew's record, too. So, it's really kind of funny, that Nick was here and I was with Drew at Purdue. Maybe we're on to something here.
Kevin, obviously we knew you coming in, there was going to be a relationship happening in Texas, and we were going to see more kids out of Texas, more than we had seen with the previous administration here. But how would you describe, someone that's coached at 2 colleges in Texas, how would you describe the Texas football player to someone that would want to know what makes those kids more maybe special?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, there's familiarity. We're going to start with everything in state. And I think, we got a late start, last year just because of the timing of the hire and the timing of me hiring a staff. Basically with 2 weeks to go in the January recruiting cycle, I was basically done because I didn't have a full staff, and got started really in May. We're behind a little bit this year, but we're always we're gonna start here in state, and I think that's important because I think next year is a big year in the state of Arizona for 20s. Obviously, with me and and some of our staff, but particularly me, being a head coach in the state of Texas for 10 years, and being you add them all up, being in Oklahoma for 5, that's right there. That's big time. You being in Norman for 5 years, which is 2 hours from Dallas, and then being an assistant for 2 years before I went to Oklahoma at A&M. Was that 17 years around there? So you know a lot of people, and a lot of coaches, a lot of families, and I think the big thing is that you develop a reputation where people can trust you and they know you, and they know you as more than just a coach. They know you in different places, and you've been consistent with coaches and communities. So, and that's a two-way street. You can pick up the phone, call a guy, and say, "Hey, look, tell me about this guy," and they're going to tell you the truth. And so that's part of the relationship building process, and that's something that we're doing here. In the state of Arizona, obviously we have those relationships, had them in the Phoenix area, and have really worked to keep developing them across the state here. And I think that same thing's going to be the case here in the state.
Well, I guess staying on that Texas theme, there's a report out today that DeMarco Murray might become the running backs coach. What can you say about that?
Well, we've talked to a lot of different people. And I've had, a couple different candidates that we've brought to campus. I've had different phone conversations with different people. I've known DeMarco since he was a senior at Bishop Gorman High School. So, he's a quality man, a class act. Has expressed some interest in getting into coaching, and because of that relationship, he's another guy that we're talking to.
In modern college football, is a high school quarterback more prepared to play right away when he gets here?
I think that's been the case probably for the last, I would say, ever since 7-on-7 started in the summer, which is basically practices for quarterbacks because of the sophistication of these 7-on-7 leagues, reading defenses, not playing backyard football, right, or not just working out and throwing with your receivers, but actually going to these competitions. And the way they've been hosted, and a lot of states have state 7-on-7 tournaments with a true state champion out of a 7-on-7 leagues where they're playing every weekend, or they're playing separate tournaments. Just like the same thing. It's really the way AAU basketball and some of the summer leagues in basketball really picked up the pace of basketball and grew it. I think 7-on-7. It grew the skill positions, offensive, defensively, but I think more than anything else, it's helped develop quarterback play out of high school.
Coach, with your new staff, who do you feel like maybe surpassed your expectations just in this year recruiting?
They all did. I mean, we just got the same expectations. So, we've got guys that everybody's recruiting. We recruit as a team. So, we've got a position coach. We've got an area coach. Guys have 2 areas at least. And then are able to recruit nationally for their position. It's important for me, the way we do things, that the position coach has that relationship with the recruit. And so that stresses some guys a little bit who may have an LA area. And then he's got a receiver or somebody in Houston. But that to me, that's the big deal. And so I think the thing that was probably pretty big for us this year is because of those relationships, because of how we did things. I think we had one decommitment maybe, right, over the course of this time, and we had a bunch of guys come after our guys in the last week from all over the country, and I think those relationships are what paid off with this recruiting class. because of the number of guys that were not just getting phone calls, but were trying to be put on visits and planes and everything else in the last 2 weeks of recruiting for the early signing date. So, you know, those relationships I think are vital in recruiting, particularly with the guy that you're going to spend the most time with, and that's your position coach.
If you choose to pursue grad transfers, do you have available scholarships?
Probably.
So,
That's better than maybe or likely, huh?
How would you categorize the importance of JC players to a program like this?
You know, we look at it a little bit differently, and you guys have heard me say I look at it like NFL free agency. I don't think you can build a complete program off of junior college players. You know, I think the continuity and the growth of the program is very difficult with, you know, a large number. But I do think when you have holes in your roster, I think it's prudent to investigate JC players because of their age, because of their maturity, particularly in the front. You know, when you're getting, you know, we've got a great player right here in town. And he's going to be a fabulous offensive lineman. He's 276, right? So what it gives him is time to grow. When you have, you know, a couple 325-pound guys that are here, but they're only here for, you know, a couple years. So I think we've, you know, in the past and other places that we've had, we've been able to utilize our junior college players, and they've had immediate impacts as they've come in and have had some success, while some guys have been able to grow a little bit more and weren't pushed to the field right away. And I think, you know, particularly the closer you get to the football in the trenches and things like that, where, you know, there's no hiding it. We lacked size and depth last year. And so those four young guys, those four JC guys, are going to be guys that are going to have. I think that's one of the reasons they made the decision that they made. You know, they see the opportunity to help a team that's got players around them, and a chance for them to get on the field and have an immediate impact.
When you talk about a Jordan Morgan and you offer a kid like that, and then you have a school like USC that comes in after you, how does that affect your close, if at all, to get that player?
It gets back to the same thing. I mean, consistency becomes important in relationships, you know. And obviously Jordan was a guy that we identified early. And he's probably one of about 10 on this list, or 11, that I could rattle off right now that, you know, people, as I said, were trying to get on planes and visits and all kinds of stuff in this last week, not just phone calls. And so it gets back to relationships. It gets back to vision. It gets back to, hey, being consistent in your message. And I think in particular the guys on this list recognize that.
After the ASU game, you said you were going to have talks with Khalil Tate, as you do every player. How did those talks go?
I talked to Khalil yesterday, so you know, I thought our conversation was a good one. You know, we talked about, you know, the NFL evaluation. We talked about, you know, his conversations with his parents and with me, and we talked about a lot of different things. But more than anything else, he talked about being excited to come back here and get started in the spring and getting better, and some of the things that he's got to work on, how he can get better. So, you know, it was a good conversation, so he's excited to be back.
How would you categorize your final evaluation of this season?
You know, it's a lot of that's, you know, things that we talked about yesterday are kind of personal. I think, you know, there's a lot of things that get blown out of proportion just because I say them to you. and then it's like, well, what would you say this for, right? So I've been down this road, so I'm not into that. But my conversation with him is one that if he wants to talk about it, he can talk about it. But you know, as I said, it was not a evaluation of his complete year. We talked about him being injured, and the ability to run and some things, some yards that were left out there. We also talked about how he can be better and what that looks like. And you know, those were some questions that he asked, some things that we talked about candidly, and so like you said, I said he's excited to be coming back and excited to get back to work.
Why is it beneficial for him and for the program for him to be back next year?
Well, I think you know, I would say those, you know, like the conversations I have with guys about the NFL are about their career, and I'm always wanting the best for them. And I was just on a radio show. You know, the easiest thing for me to do is to want guys to come back all the time. We do a lot of research on our own, and we have a lot of contacts in the NFL. We've got a lot of people that we trust, besides just the overall NFL evaluation that talks about, you know, where guys are, where they see them being drafted, if they're drafted, and we share that information. You know, I've had guys that played 1 year, was a redshirt freshman, and then played a year, like Mike Evans. You know, I would love to have Mike Evans for another year, right? But it was time for him to go. Jake Matthews, on the other hand, was, you know, from our information, was a late second round guy, but had the opportunity to play himself into the first round, and he did, which made him a lot of money. But we've had those different guys that have been in different spaces, you know, and it's basically about what can you improve? Can you improve your stock as a player? And you know, that's money that you will never make up if you turn pro. So you know, those conversations are completely different with different players all the time. And I think over the course of time, you know, I'll have some different players or different families talk to those guys just about, you know, the trust factor that will happen. But that didn't happen in this case, because we sat down actually sat down in the summertime with Khalil's folks, and just talked about, hey, here's what it looks like, here's what we're going to do, and you know, here's the trust factor, and just be able to, let's just talk about it at the end, and we'll give you all the information that we can gather.
How do you like how the QB room shapes up now with Khalil coming back, Grant coming in, plus the other?
Yeah, we're going to sign a quarterback in every class. I think, you know, we have to, you know, so we don't have the holes in the roster that we have right now. You know, because basically right now, with Khalil coming back, you've got 3 freshmen, right? Because of the 2 young guys last year, you've got 3 freshmen, and you know, Rhett is the only other guy that's played any meaningful minutes. So, you know, you got to like where that is. You know, you've got some staggered classes, but there's going to be some competition, you know, as we go forward. Certainly a year from now, right? But you got enough guys here now that can that you can work with, particularly with Grant coming in as a, you know, I think that's the other thing here. We got what, 8 mid-year guys, so you know that's going to be a big bonus for us, particularly, you know, with some of these guys are going to be competing. They either be backups or competing to play or start.
Can you tell if the new indoor arena is a recruiting asset?
Yeah, it's going to be a recruiting asset. I think it's going to be a recruiting asset for not just football, but there'll be other people who use it. I know firsthand now that I've lived here, you guys forgot to tell me about this thing called monsoon. So, you know, now I can have a standard practice time and not have to worry about it, instead of, you know, looking at, I've become some sort of a kind of a weatherman since I've been here, with radar on my desk and trying to figure out, you know, what time and how far away, and because of the lightning. So, you know, from a recruiting standpoint, yes. And, you know, everybody's going to, the things that everybody's, I hate to say this, but, you know, you get negative recruited. Everybody tries to do it, talk about heat, talk about this, that, and the other. And obviously that the indoor is going to be a big factor in fighting off some of that stuff, because, you know, it gives you a consistent place to train. And you know, and it also, you know, it's just like anything else. You know, what facilities say to families and to young people, it basically says there's a commitment, you know, to winning. And so, you know, those types of things, they do matter, and they will be a huge help, and it will be a practical help too.
Kevin, there's been a lot of talk in terms of the indoor facility about how, and you just mentioned how it's going to help you in August with the rain and the heat, but curious, and this kind of came up after the Washington State game, is it climate controlled to the point where you can go in there, turn it down to 20, 25, and prepare for cold weather games as well?
I haven't gotten that far yet. I know that we got big doors on the side, right? So we can go back and forth from the grass fields to there. So it also gives us more practice space. I can tell you this. I coached at a place. Well, I probably shouldn't tell you that. Anyway, I can tell you what we're not going to do. I was coaching at Minnesota, and we opened with, ironically, Hawaii. And somebody had an idea that if we turn the heat up to as high, turn the heaters on in there. Now the heaters in Minnesota, they're heaters. It was hot in there, and we did that for about 3-4 days. And then we got out there, and I think our team was so dehydrated we couldn't hardly move. So we will not be doing that.
How big of a deal was it to get Jalen Curry and Bobby Wolf today, and what can you tell us about those two guys?
Well, it's, you know, those are guys that we identified early. I think obviously it's another relationship type situation, and I think you know this. You know, you don't get it. It's funny to me. You've got other guys on here that were as highly recruited, but we're paying attention to stars. So, you know, that's all part of it. I get it. You know, but I think our evaluation process from the people that were recruiting these guys, and obviously when we get a look at them on the field, I think it's going to validate our evaluation process. And you know, these are two guys that obviously you know, are really good players. You know, highly recruited. You know, Bobby's 6'2", really long corner, can run, is very, very physical, great change of direction, and you know, Booby is just a big guy. You know, he's a receiver type that we don't have, a big, thick receiver that can high point the ball. It's very, very physical. So, you know, those are two players that played at a high level in high school, and you know, we want to continue that here.
Time for one or two more quick questions.
How do you find a recruit in America Samoa, and what was that process like?
We're recruiting everywhere, man. I mean, it's I think, you know, it's we've had a history here with recruiting the islands, and you know, one of the first people I called when I got here called me. I can't remember which one it was, but I talked to Coach Tomey at really early in the process, probably, you know, the day before I got on the plane to come here. So obviously in some of the more successful eras here, recruiting in the islands has been a big step, and even here on on the mainland when guys have moved. And so, you know, we've got contacts throughout that area. We've got contacts here on the mainland, and so we evaluate a lot of different guys, evaluate a lot of different people, and hopefully, you know, those kind of. And again, it's a relationship-based situation, and once it's just like anybody else from Houston or from anywhere else. You develop that trust factor and that kind of continuity, then in that relationship, then that familiarity will grow in that area, and we hope that will continue.
Do you expect Jace Whitaker and PJ Johnson to be back?
I do, at this point.
Overall, last question.
I know it's early, obviously, you haven't gotten these guys in a practice or anything, but how do you feel about the overall roster right now heading into spring?
You mean just everybody?
The new guys plus the guys who are coming back.
Well, I think, you know, I think the big takeaway today is we've got 8 mid-year enrollees, right? So, you know, you've got so that's going to have an impact on the thing that I started with. You know, the 2 JC O linemen obviously are going to have a huge impact on what we do in the spring from a numbers and depth standpoint, and the D linemen. So, you know, you will have a better look at that at the end, but that's why we brought them here, and you know, because that's where we're hurting most. You know, we got to keep developing on the perimeter. We've got some good young players at wide receiver, but obviously, you know, we had 3 really good ones graduate, real consistent guys. So we're going to have to push these young guys to the forefront, and they're going to have to come on, but I like their talent level. The defensive front, again, that's where, you know, with their junior college transfers, that's going to be the big deal, you know, with PJ and getting the health back of some guys that we missed down the stretch, our defensive ends. So, you know, the last 4 or 5 games with, you know, some of those guys that didn't play, that should look a little bit different in the spring. And obviously the number of DBs and the ability to move some guys around in the back end, and instead of playing with one group, you know, we're going to have to develop a 2 deep there. So, you know, you got to feel better, you know, about the depth, but it'll look even a little bit differently in the fall when the rest of the O and D line guys get there, right? So, but at least we'll have a little bit more depth throughout the spring in our fronts. So I think that'll be a good thing for us, and be able to get some continuity.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, but I'll release those probably, I don't know, first of the year. When the kids get back, I'd like to tell them first. Is that all right? All right. Thanks.